Okay, everyone, Cate and I are going to present how we managed to deliver our practical courses during the pandemic and what the plans are after the pandemic. So we're talking specifically about one of the modules, measurement in chemistry. The aim of this module is to familiarize the student with physical measurement. It's basically analytical chemistry and is heavy data analysis based. And it's very important, for example, in a synthetic lab, you go to the lab and the main thing is done in the lab and you write like about the yield, etc. in your report. But this is very important after what students do and data analysis. And then the experiment with the study of chemical phenomena. So that's the aim of the module. The module delivery before the pandemic, we have workshops and labs. And labs include Prelab tutoring system, which I'm going to explain more in the next slide. And students do this Prelab, and then they go to the lab, they do their practical, they do their report, which is mostly data analysis, problem solving, and then they get a mark and we give feedback to them, which I explain more about feedback and marking process as well. So, okay. Well, I went back to that. I don't know how to. Okay, that's done. So what's our Prelab tutoring system? It was 10 years ago I took over this module, and I realized very soon the lack of preparedness of students. They go to the lab and we spend so much time on things we shouldn't do. It's waste our time and we could focus on important things in the lab. So I always start from small scale, whatever I do, but this one was well received by other module leaders and and then we covered Prelab tutoring. We covered all year one modules soon with this Prelab tutoring system. Prelab consists of visual aids, photos and videos of experimental procedure and equipment. There is online assessment to make sure students have gone through everything and they are prepared to go to the lab, and includes safety, background theory, practical procedure, and treatment of results. And I show you one example of one of experiments, Prelab, in Canvas. Apologies for if it's small, I couldn't fit everything in one page, but I can explain. This is, for example, for one experiment. Students have access to experimental script, and then all the information about safety, chemical hazard, risk assessment, standard operation procedures, as well as, for example, for this experiment, we have PowerPoint photos of equipment and specific things, tips for the students during the experiment. And then our very successful Prelab videos prepared by former students, detail of lab procedure, practical procedure, and how to work with equipment. Then after that, they take a safety test and the second Prelab test to make sure they do understand the theory, what they do in the lab, what they're going to do post-lab session. They have to pass Prelab assessment to be able to go to the lab. Marking and feedback is different from year one. In year one, students submit their report. Demonstrators give detailed feedback on their report, annotate their report, and they send it back to students. However, we do it in a different way. Marking even before the pandemic was face-to-face. It's in the lab during the marking session. We timetable marking session for them. There is a dialogue between the marker and the student, and it's very important. It's like a mini viva. The demonstrators ask students about what they've written, how they've done the data analysis, about the theory and everything, and then they give them feedback, oral feedback, as well as written feedback. We've got feedback forms which guide demonstrators through giving feedback to make sure inconsistency in feedback given to students, and also detailed marking scheme and grade descriptors, because different demonstrators might have some generous, some harsh, so we make it as consistent as possible. So that was how we ran everything beautifully, and we end up with like a nice module and system in place until COVID-19 happened. And in March 2020, we were said, okay, everyone goes home, and how could we manage this complicated lab online? We did it, but some things didn't work, something worked, and we learned from that. And we have planned for a hybrid delivery during the next academic year. What happened was we had to ask students to submit their report online, asynchronous. We asked demonstrators to mark them, give detailed feedback, upload in Canvas, Vital, and then send the feedback to students. However, as we know, students don't read the feedback, don't reflect on feedback, don't articulate what they've learned to. And then we ended up after a couple of weeks with lack of quality of reports. It was significantly decreased, and problem-solving skills suffered. We lost touch, as we all did during the pandemic. What worked was Prelab. It was the only thing, the connection students had with what happened if they were in the lab. They could watch everything, pre-lab procedure, the video, how to work with the equipment. They could relate it, and they could easily answer pre-lab questions, which showed that these videos worked to give them an idea what they do, or what they did in the lab. So that was the best we could do during that academic year. I'm going to leave it to Cate to explain about what we learned and our future plans. And I stop the controlling this. Cate, have you got it back?
I have, thank you. Okay, so at the end of last academic year, we sort of sat down and put a plan together. And then we put another plan together, and another plan, and another plan. So as the government were changing their minds, so did our planning for academic year 20 to 2021. And then in the end, after this massively iterative process, we just said, right, okay, what we do know is that if we deliver Chem 246 virtually, we can deliver the learning outcomes effectively without any hands-on. So that's the decision that we took, with the sort of idea that maybe we might get some hands-on a bit later on. So what we'll talk through now is what academic year 2020 to 2021 actually looked like. Okay, so what we found was that our pre-lab activities were the most vital resource. That was our lifeline into what actually happens in these experiments in the laboratory setting. So we had all of those videos and presentations about how the equipment worked, etc. So that was their visual, tangible link into the experiments. And what we asked the students to do was to watch all of those pre-lab videos and do the pre-lab assessments, and then complete a write-up with sort of demo data, if you like. So they were given data sets to write up, and these were kind of semi-individualized data sets. In order to support them during those virtual experiments, and they were given a week on each experiment to write it up, to do all of the pre-lab, access all of the pre-lab resources, and then write up their virtual experiment. To support them in doing that, we provided daily drop-in sessions. So that was an hour a day where students can come and access demonstrator support. We also encouraged them to use the Canvas discussion boards for any issues that they were having in real time. So if they had an issue that was stopping their progress, that was their port of call, the discussion board. But what we actually found was, even though they did use the discussion board in part, because Canvas doesn't allow it to be anonymous, what they actually ended up doing was emailing Gita and myself, and we had millions of emails. I mean, it was sort of averaging about 40 a day. So that was quite intense for us. We also planned for synchronous online marking to sort of match that, sit next to a demonstrator in the lab, that mini Viva situation, and students arranged their marking slot with a demonstrator at a convenient time for them both, and they had half an hour where they would have this discussion and have their marking done in a synchronous setting, and that worked incredibly well. Okay, so the exception to these kind of virtual experiments, these sort of asynchronous write-ups, if you like, was an experiment that we run, and we call it the NMR experiment. And this is an experiment where they usually they would record their own NMR data, and sort of the idea behind this experiment is that they learn how to process and manipulate and do a lot of structural elucidation. And this experiment was slightly different because we actually took this semester 2 experiment and put it into January, and we had groups of students online on Zoom, working in breakout rooms, going through this experiment online with live demonstrator help, and it was quite intensive in terms of man hours for demonstrators, because they were online kind of 3 to 6 hours a day. So students were doing this synchronously online, and this worked incredibly well, because under normal circumstances they would record their data and then they'd spend a lot of time in a computer suite processing the data, and demonstrators would walk around the computer suite and they'd just put their hands up. Actually, during this experiment, they had their demonstrator support at the touch of a help button online, so it was much more instantaneous. Demonstrators could show them what to do in a group, sort of by taking control of their screen. So that worked really, really well, much better than in previous years. Okay, so I'm just going to give you a quick minute to have a read through this. This is what the sort of feedback and comments that we got from our students about how we had arranged these virtual labs. So they're sort of saying, actually, rather than having the breadth of all of these different experiments in the lab, we had to really drill down and articulate our understanding of each of those experiments. And actually having that time with the demonstrator during the marking sessions online was really helpful, because we had like one-to-one with somebody to discuss those experiments and what we'd done in order to improve on the next one. They also complemented the use of the Prelabs. We were really lucky to have that resource available to us ahead of going online. Okay, so this is a second year cohort that are going into year 3 in September, and essentially have missed quite a bit of hands-on lab skills in semester 2. Or what is normally delivered in semester 2. So we're talking here about some inorganic experiments, some physical chemistry experiments. How are we going to kind of fill that void in this sort of perceived skills deficit? So what we've got planned as these year 2 students transition into year 3 is a 2 weeks skills passport. And what we plan to do is have the year 2 students in the lab performing partial experiments, because they've done they know what the experiment is about. They know how to use the kit from their sort of virtual experience, and they've done the write-up. So it's not as though we have to get them to accumulate that data. We just want them to experience the hands-on acquisition and you know, sort of getting that experience of the kit that they would have been using. So we're going to kind of do this skills passport where they do sort of half a day experiments using these bits of kit, just to get that hands-on experience, because you know, ultimately nothing replaces that hands-on experience. So going into 21-22, so plans for the next academic year, of course, we're going to keep that pre-lab tutoring system, whether we are online or not online. So we are going to plan for hands-on experiments and some virtual experiments so that they get that breadth of knowledge in addition to the depth that we've seen come out because they're doing these virtual write-ups. The ones that will remain online is the NMR experiment, and that will still be delivered synchronously. We're going to keep the online submission of lab reports as well, and we're also going to keep the synchronous online marking for instant formative feedback. We felt that those online marking sessions, with them having a bit more flex in terms of when they are arranged, were much better, and students seem to value them more than in previous years. Okay, so that's us. Thank you for listening. Any questions?
Thank you, Gita, and thank you, Cate, for that. That was really interesting. It's great to sort of reflect on what worked and what didn't as well, isn't it? And your experiences of that. Has anyone got any questions for Gita and Cate?
I have a question. That was very interesting. Thank you. So you said those pre-lab videos that you were showing the students and that were very useful. Did you make those videos then yourself, or did you find any of these videos already online that we could access?
They are made by, at least in our module, well, all our practical courses are after these years are covered by Prelab, because we found it very useful, and students as well. Some module leaders created these videos themselves, but we did it in this module from the first place, but former students made these videos, and students' feedback shows that they appreciate much more when they are made by former students. We have comments that they know what they're talking about, they know what students, where students make mistakes. Thanks very much for the tips from student point of view, etc.
Okay, so you were contacting students that were a year up to make those videos for the 1 year younger. Is that okay?
Yes, initially it was like a funding which we with which we paid them, students, like we recruited them. Some of them were made by like final year research project. We can give this task to them to create the videos, reflect on them, write a report. And also summer students. Cate and I recruited a very, very talented former student 2 years ago. And basically it's the videos are professionally made. This student has made for us.
Okay, good. I might come back to ask for those students then.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you.
Cate, anything to add?
No, I think having the students make the videos is a real advantage, because what I think I've heard comments from our students where they say, you tell us how to do it one way, but the students, they know, that where the difficult bits are, and the bit that if you miss that is really vital. So they tend to much prefer having somebody, it's about having someone authentic almost, tell you what to do. And to be honest, they're not polished, they're not overly produced. Some of the ones, the more recent ones that we had from a couple of years ago that were made for the inorganic, I mean, they've got sort of, captions and screenshots, and what they've asked for now is sort of screencasts of what's going on the instruments and what to click and things like that. So I think that's probably our next step. But I would say that they don't really need to be polished. The most important thing is that they're authentic.
Okay, but did you guide them first on how to make the video a little bit and what the content of the video should be? And did you also check the videos before you will release them to the students? Yeah.
Yes, we do check them, yes. However, the last one, Cate and I, the student we had, to be honest, he knew much more than us how to create the videos. We still don't know. We asked him, can you please write the procedure for us, for next students to follow that? And as Cate said, they're not polished, but I would say they are polished videos he created 2 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, he even sort of was able to film himself and then almost freeze the video and then show like a screenshot of what was happening at that point, whether it be from the instrument or he was really, really good actually. So if you get somebody who's got an interest, you know, who might be doing, I don't know, physics, say, but if it's got an interest in producing as well, they're sort of the ideal candidates. But yeah, ours was pretty good. So.
And one more question, just to understand how this works. So, and that student who was making the video, was he then going to the chemistry, that was chemistry, right? Chemistry lab and doing the video there. So he had access to all the equipment and was just kind of demonstrating it from there. Okay.
Yes, he did this lab before and he was good in doing this experiment. So, and then he repeated them in the lab over the summer in the teaching lab and videoed them.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And he just used an iPad to video. It wasn't sort of any kind of specialist equipment or anything. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.